So hopefully you're all here for our presentation around facilitation of large group appreciative inquiry in the virtual world, a case study. We're going to share our experiences with a large appreciative inquiry that we did entirely in this virtual world. So I am going to, in just a moment, drop a handout in the chat room that's in PDF format. It has all of the forms that John's going to talk about that we used, and a lot of the other outlines and things that we actually used, and their examples or actual content of what we used. I also have those published online at this website. This is my website for my company. And if it's /workshop-resources, you can get a copy of the PowerPoint there. You can get the handout I'm about to drop in the chat box here in just a minute. And I'm waiting because if I send it and more people log in, then I got to send it again. So I just wait until we get most people logged in here. And then there's also a feedback option there. So if you'd go there after today and give us some feedback on this. John and I both enjoy doing sharing our information. I do a lot of webinar kinds of work, and I really always appreciate any feedback from you all that we can get. And then there's our emails at the bottom. So if there's personal connections, or I just sent an email out to all of you, and both John and I are on that email as well. So anyway, there's where you can get your resources. We'll send out the link. I believe comes through Center for Appreciative Inquiry, but if either way, I will make sure that you get that once we get that cleaned up from here and get it posted. Okay, John.
Okay, so good morning. My name is John Thibodeau, and as it says on the screen, I am the Assistant Provost and the Vice President for Institutional Effectiveness and Student Success at Gateway Technical College. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Gateway in a few slides, but I have been doing AI for over 10 years. I did the facilitator training through the Center for Appreciative Inquiry. When the college undertook a large internal project, and we did appreciative inquiry at that time, probably about 12, 13 years ago with our institutional accreditation. And so at that point, I got very interested in AI. I love the positivity of it. I love the interaction and the energy of it. I did my dissertation on appreciative inquiry as it relates to institutional effectiveness. So, and I'm always looking for opportunities to apply this in new ways. And so really appreciated, again, the opportunity to work with Scott and our faculty on this one. And I think it was very successful.
And I'm Scott Geddes. I am a retired faculty member from Phoenix College, a two-year college in Phoenix, Arizona, where I was there as a faculty member and an administrator for 40 plus years, and have been involved doing appreciative inquiry and then becoming certified as facilitator, as John said, more than well over 10 years now, and considered it a large part of my consulting practice. I am the founder and president of Inspired Engagement, just mostly me, but I do have a small team of people that help. We do a lot of organizational development work, a lot of focus on the Clifton Strengths Instrument, and that's how John and I originally met, is that I was invited to come to his college and do a little presentation on well-being, and that connected to strengths, and they wanted to become a strengths-based organization. So we've been working together now, John, what, 6 years? Is that right? Mm-hmm. About 6.
All right.
Working together toward that role, as well as I do some work with the leadership team at Gateway in executive development and executive team leadership. And again, my enrollment or my participation in appreciative inquiries has been wide and varied. I've done very small group, some of them most recently to try to determine a way to be more collegial employees with each other, right? And then we've done it with large groups. I've done some large on-site ones that developed strategic planning for a large national organization. So both small and large, I've done both, but had never done one virtually before this. And when we had this planned and then COVID hit, John and I thought, gee, let's give it a shot. So that's why we're here today, is to share some of those experiences with you. You know what, John? We have a small group. Why don't we ask each of you just to take 15 seconds, 30 seconds, introduce yourself just briefly. We wouldn't do that with a group of 30, but I think we've got 7 or 8 here, and we probably have time to do that if we jump around the room pretty quick. Would that be okay with everybody? You don't have to,
Sure.
but I don't care any order. Why don't you just unmute and jump in and let you work that out? I don't have to call names. Somebody volunteer.
I'll volunteer to go first. My name is
Great.
Nevin Kamath. I'm a organization development consultant based in Austin, Texas. I'm enrolled in a course on appreciative inquiry at Penn State. I'm very excited to learn more about this.
Yes, great.
My name is Mary Leah McAnally. I'm on faculty at Texas A&M University, but I live in Austin, Texas. I have been doing appreciative inquiry for a number of years and switched over to Zoom last year. And I'm here to just see what tips and tricks I can pick up, and happy to share what I know.
Great. Thanks, Mary. I think you and I were in one of Jeannie's presentations on resilience or a while back. Yeah.
I think maybe a couple months ago. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
I'll jump in. My name's Dave Stinson. I'm with Trinity Western University up in Vancouver,
Wonderful.
Canada.
Yeah.
I'm director of the Learning Commons and Accessible Learning. So I'm fairly new. Jen's my colleague as well, and you'll meet her. But yeah, excited to be here.
Wonderful. Great. Welcome from Canada. I do a lot of work up in Canada and especially in the Western provinces. That's great. I'm glad you're here.
So hello from Romania. We are part of the Camp Blanche Romania team, training and consulting company. And we are using quite a lot of appreciative inquiry tools in our facilitation sessions and in work group and team coaching and so on.
Wonderful. Well, welcome all the way from Romania.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So glad you're here.
Thank you for the event.
Absolutely.
So I'm Lucy, and I'm from Nova Scotia, Canada, and I have spent about, I guess, 15 years in the college system, and just actually finished the accelerated appreciative inquiry facilitation.
Great.
And so just dipping my toes in, was really excited and really looking forward to hear about your experiences.
Wonderful. Which college were you at? Were you at Nova Scotia? Community
I
college?
was at Nova Scotia, yeah, but I actually spent a number of years in Ontario as well. So
yeah, wonderful.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, is my microphone working? Yes, it is now.
Is.
Hi, I'm Jen Skelding. I'm a professor in the School of Education at Trinity Western University. Dave is my partner in Appreciative Inquiry, and I'm currently using AI in my own dissertation to shift strategic language through praxis with teacher candidates.
Wonderful. Yep, great use.
Hello, my name is Eric Tankanko. I'm an internal OD consultant for Stanford Healthcare. My manager and colleague, Jeff, is Gestalt trained and has been using AI in his 25 plus years development practice. We've used it for executive leadership teams, and I'm looking to implement it in my personal practice or my individual practice as the chief nursing officer. And I'm just here to see how to do it virtually.
Wonderful. I mentioned a while ago doing appreciative inquiry around collegiality, and two of those sessions that I've done using appreciative inquiry were both in nursing education programs. It seemed to be an issue with them in particular in a couple of different colleges around the country. So yeah, great use. Wonderful. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for being here. Who do we have left?
Hi, I'm Deborah Mayer. I'm in Tucson, Arizona, and I've been an appreciative inquiry practitioner since 2006. And I got to work directly with David Cooperrider at Case Western. I've applied it in a number of settings. I lived in Washington, D.C. for like 33 years and I did a summit for the White House for the CIO Council when they were looking to reduce costs and create cross-cultural or cross-agency initiatives that were cost-saving. I've morphed it and used it in a number of settings. I'm also a certified coach and use it in coaching. And I also have developed a strategic planning process that engages the whole system using appreciative inquiry. And now I've morphed it. I'm right now serving as an interim executive director of a nonprofit organization to transform it at the local community level. So it's been a really interesting journey from personal to large system to community-based. And I'm really excited about learning more about how to make it virtual.
Wonderful. Thanks, Deborah. Nice to be here. I hope we can connect here down in Tucson someday soon.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gopi Block. Gosh, where to start? Resonating with those Austin folks, got my undergrad at UT in corporate communication, and then got my master's at American University in OD, and went through that program before it closed recently. And currently I'm an internal OD practitioner for the first Hindu faith schools in the UK. And so they're doing a large system school improvement feedback cycle. And I am working to influence it with Appreciative Inquiry. And they're trying to connect about 12,000 people virtually. So very interested in this to see how we could do that.
Yeah. Awesome. John, I'm always humbled when I get groups like this together because the variety of expertise and knowledge, but the Appreciative Inquiry engagement in this group is really, really high. And if some of you have been in some of the other sessions I know that I've been in that the center has sponsored, there's a variety of expertise around Appreciative Inquiry, and this group is really experienced, and I appreciate you being here. So yeah, what a great group. What we did, just briefly, and then John's going to introduce the college and we'll go through the specifics of what we did. This all started when we wanted to do an appreciative. John and I have conducted several appreciative inquiries within the Gateway program to build some strategic planning for programming, right, within the college. So it wouldn't be our first time we worked, but we did it in a room, right? Flip charts. Bless the mess is kind of, for me at least, my mantra in those. You know, the more flip charts you get up and the better you can get people moving around and talking and writing and drawing and those kind of things, the better. And the energy in the room's really high. When we talked about doing this with faculty, one of the first questions that we were asked a year and a half, 2 years ago was, well, can't you do it paperless? You know, we need to be environmentally sound and we should do it paperless. So we actually started thinking about the virtual world before COVID. We hadn't quite gotten it figured out on how we were going to do that because, you know, the whole virtual world hadn't developed quite where it is today. But we were starting to think that way. It wasn't like it was the first time when COVID hit. So when COVID hit and we decided we still wanted to do this, John and I put our heads together. We talked to some other folks that we work with, just doing some virtual webinaring and things, and designed this. So what we did is we had 2 half days. We had about 250 of the Gateway Technical College faculty that were the participants. We split into 2 days so they wouldn't be sitting, you know, in one room all day. They had other in-service activities and options for the rest of the days. It was 2 of us, the 2 lead facilitators, and we also had to get 9 volunteers to become what we call room hosts, and we'll explain that in a few minutes because it took a few extra people because of the large numbers and the limits that Zoom will bring to the platform. It was 100% virtual, and as John will explain a little deeper, we use Google Docs as our collection tool for the data, and we use Zoom as our communication tool to keep people engaged. The topic was excellence in teaching and learning, came from, and John will talk about a little bit, the whole guided pathways piece that we have here in junior colleges in the States. John, do you want to talk about the college for us?
Absolutely. So Gateway Technical College is one of 16 technical colleges in the state of Wisconsin. We're a system. We're focused on career education. A few of our technical colleges offer a liberal arts degree. Gateway does not, but we have over 47 associate degrees, all in occupational fields. We do teach English and sociology and psychology and math and science to our students in the context of the career that they're pursuing. We're spread out over 3 counties and 6 educational centers. So you can see about 21,000 students. So we're a fairly big institution, and we're very spread out. So normally when we get all our faculty together for an in-service, they are driving in from the 4 corners of our region to our central location to one big auditorium. And they're used to that. But again, we're a fairly large institution, so it takes some wrangling to get these kinds of things done. We've been using, as I said in my introduction, AI for a while now since our last accreditation. And as Scott mentioned earlier, we're also a strength-based college. So we're using the Clifton Strengths Framework for a lot of what we do. This particular topic came out of Guided Pathways, which is sort of a national framework for transforming the student success experience. We got involved as part of a cohort with the American Association of Community Colleges. And you can see on this slide the 4 components or categories where the best practices fall as far as the relationship we have with our students. And the one that we were focusing in on for this particular part of the work was that 4th box, to ensure that students are learning. We were doing a lot of other transformative work as far as clarifying how students get into the program, helping them choose, helping them persist and complete their programs. But then we were moving to that last component, talking about the educational quality. And at Gateway, we had a lot of other student success initiatives going. And so we combined them all into an internal framework to help our staff get their head around what we're trying to do. And so you can see that we had several stops on the road to student success. And we focused in for this in-service. Again, we had a segment on excellence in teaching and learning. And Scott, if you go to the next slide.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. So we had just, our team had just come back from one of the AACC institutes talking about the Ensure Learning pillar. And one of the practices that they came back from that workshop with is faculty engagement. And basically we agreed that anything we're going to do to improve teaching and learning at the college has to be organic to the faculty. We cannot come in and tell the faculty, here is what excellent teaching and learning is. They are our experts, you know, and they're part of our culture. And so we decided that our work would be to somehow amplify the voice of the faculty and learn from them what they wanted teaching and learning to be, what they thought excellence in teaching and learning would be. Scott and I immediately thought of Appreciative Inquiry as the framework to do that. It's a great large group discussion model that really elicits positive feedback from people, and that's what we wanted. You know, because we know that in any Appreciative Inquiry, there are people who want to go to the, well, here's what's wrong and here's what's bad and don't do this. But we really wanted to start that conversation with the faculty in a very positive way. And so that's why we decided that Appreciative Inquiry would be our vehicle. Okay. We also, Scott, if you go 2 slides in for me, there you go. Our ultimate goal then was to create a faculty teaching and learning caucus. Some institutions call it a faculty senate. We don't have that structure in our college, but we wanted a standing body, a forum for faculty to have these discussions about academic matters, really all kinds of academic matters, to take a very big picture view of teaching and learning, and to give constructive input then to the administration to help us help them improve teaching and learning at the college. And so the results of this Appreciative Inquiry with all the faculty then were condensed and put in a report. We'll talk about that later in the workshop. And that document was handed over to the Faculty Teaching and Learning Caucus to become really the basis of their conversation, and they're mining it for input, and they're using that voice from the faculty to help sort of frame their work and where they're going to go as an advisory body. So that's what we were ultimately trying to get to, and the Appreciative Inquiry was really a kickoff and a way to create that pool of positive input from all of our faculty that our caucus could then use. And to do that, we made the decision when, as Scott said, we decided we could do this. We didn't want to cancel. We wanted to go virtual. And so we decided that we were going to use Zoom and we're going to use Google Docs. Those were the 2 technologies that our faculty are most familiar with. We use the G Suite platform at the college for all of our email and calendaring and everything. So people are very familiar with Google. And we had been teaching in Zoom since the pandemic started. And actually before, we were using Zoom as our video conferencing model. So we had those tools. We didn't have to teach those tools to the faculty, which was a great help. Our goal was access. Okay? One of the things we learned was that our faculty might be calling in or dialing in from just about anywhere. So we had to make sure that all the documents were set so that they were universally available to anyone on the internet, not just available internally. And that was actually a setting we had to remember to change on all of our documents. So they were available to the whole internet, that they weren't just available to people dialing in from a gateway email or dialing in from our internal system. We also had to recognize just some basic things that happen in a room that don't happen in the virtual world. For example, if somebody couldn't get into Zoom, they obviously couldn't use the chat to tell us they were having a technical problem. So we had to set up a secondary way for people to contact us and request technical support. So we had to think about those things that might come up that normally if you're in a room, people are just going to walk up to you and talk. So we had to think about, like, you had to really kind of visualize getting everyone into the virtual room was really key. And then thinking about the Google Docs, and this is where I fell back on my organizational talent, is figuring out, as Scott said, in a room, we'd hang up a bunch of flip charts. But we needed to figure out, how are we going to organize all these documents electronically? And we'll talk about this navigation guide, but that was just one of the tools we created. We created a bunch of tools to, again, try to make it easy for people to access this.
John, I just dropped the tools and forms in the chat room. So
okay.
They are there. You don't need to follow along, folks. If they're there for you, you can. But I did just drop them in the chat room, so they should now be available.
Thanks, Scott. And I think, and we picked, and we had, there are going to be hardships. I guess I want to make sure we say that from the very beginning is, the way of Zoom does not run smoothly. We did our AI in August, probably on the day that every virtual school in the United States was trying to start on Zoom. And Zoom actually had some downtime that day. Zoom was struggling to keep up with what was going on all over the country. And that was the day we picked. So that was the worst possible day to do this. And our vice president provost, who was supposed to kick the whole thing off, got COVID. So she couldn't be there either. So we had to do a little bit of running around, but that happens in a regular AI too. There's always complications. So I just want to say you need a little bit of grace too. People need to cut you some slack when you're doing this, but it is really effective. Had a question from Deborah. Yes, we do. We had that conversation with, she asked if we had buy-in from the administration to carry out the faculty recommendations. We've had that conversation and the administration agreed, yes, we do want the faculty voice. We agreed that these are recommendations, not decisions. So there have to be some conversation and negotiation, but we are going into it with the understanding that we are open to the faculty's voice.
And I will suggest that John and I worked through that and talked about it. I come from a faculty background and have a faculty association, faculty governance background. And I have some very strong opinions about the role of faculty in shared governance in an institution. Obviously, as a consultant, I'm working for the administration of the college, for the best of the college, but certainly report to the administration. So we had that discussion, and I won't suggest that it's always at Gateway is not the only college I work with. It is not always the smoothest transition to talk about the role, but it was absolutely endorsed by the administration here to give this to the faculty and let this be their project in that faculty caucus.
Great. So Scott's going to talk a little bit about the AI model that we use.
Yeah, I don't want to talk below anybody because a lot of you know a lot about AI, but I'm going to just very briefly tell you what we did and then a little bit about the slides we used to introduce it, but this will be pretty quick because most of you have the experience. We did present, these are the topics and the areas and the activities we did. We did present the context of the topic to the group. So we laid the foundation for why we were there and the background of just a lot of what John just did. I did a presentation about what AI is, because a lot of the faculty have involved in taking one or being involved in one, but most had never facilitated, and many had never even participated in one. We did use paired interviews. So they did one-on-one interviews with each other in a structured inquiry guide. Those of you that have done this before know that that's one of the options that you can certainly gather information. We drafted the questions carefully, and there's a copy of the inquiry guide in your handout, and we'll talk about that in a bit. We then brought them back together into small group storytelling and theme collection, so that they took the high points and themes from the stories from the interviews, collected them, recorded them onto our Google Docs. And then we had to conduct a theme affinity, so that we could determine the interest and the affinity and the energy around some of the themes that had been collected by these groups. Now remember, we had 125 interviews going on, right? So this was a large number and a large amount of data to collect. So as John's going to talk about later, we used Google Forms, and we actually did a voting system so that they could log in and indicate their affinity for the themes that we had collected during the first day. So then from that, John and I, and with some help, kind of massaged that affinity results and created 6 communities of interest. And those would be the topics that we would then drive the second day on. And the second day we conducted a SOAR. Most of you know that that's the appreciative version of SWOT. It's a far superior in every way, in my opinion, but it is strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. And then we had each group write a provocative proposition around excellence in teaching and learning at Gateway, create some strategic intentions and recommended actions to develop that excellence in teaching and learning. And then we ask every individual to submit to us, to the group, a personal gift, a commitment, or some kind of a request that they felt they individually could commit to the increase in excellence in teaching and learning, and the carrying out of the outcomes of this appreciative inquiry. And we collected all of this on the Google Docs as we went. Again, yeah, and by the way, I'm happy with you interrupting me if you need to, and certainly we're watching the chat room as well. But if you need a question and you got something hot in your head, just interrupt, okay? Just unmute and jump in.
Scott, let me just put it, I believe we're going to share the slide deck too after the presentation.
Yes, I think most of you, I think somebody logged in a little late, but it is at inspired-engagement/workshop-resources. There is a copy of the slideshow. Okay.
I always just see people furiously taking notes when there's 10 bullets on a slide. That's good.
I talk for a living. I like it when you take notes. No, I'm kidding.
Okay.
I'm kidding. I can't take notes and listen at the same time. I'm an auditory learner, so I can't do it. So we use, these are actual slides. A lot of what we've got up here are actual slides that we used, and then some are certainly educational for you. This was the slide I used to talk about appreciative inquiry with a group, and it's defined as Cooper Ryder defined it, and involving systematic discovery and what's most effective. And we just talk a little bit about what it is an inquiry and why we would do that. We talk a little bit about the idea behind the positive power of vision, right? The power of words, and how our image inspires our action. And if we can create this picture of our future of excellence in teaching and learning, talk a little bit about the power of AI, and examples are placebo and Pygmalion and positive thinking. And again, those of you that are practitioners, this is remedial stuff, but I do it as a way to kind of develop that understanding in the group. And then we jumped pretty quickly into the appreciative interview process, right? The appreciative inquiry interviews. Again, it was all going to be done virtually, so a little different than having them pair up with someone. We worked pretty hard at that discussion too, on whether they would choose who they go with or not. And well, we had to assign partnerships because they couldn't easily select that, because in those days, breakout rooms, you couldn't individually select, and we had to pair them up. So we did that somewhat randomly, I will suggest, but we did the pairing, of course, right? So the breakout rooms that go random is how we had to do that, but we did pair them up. Is this one you, John? You talking about?
Yeah.
Zoom? Okay.
Yes. Okay. So how we made that happen from the beginning with the paired interviews. probably the most valuable thing that we did, in my opinion, was creating what we call the navigation guide. And we'll show you that in a minute. But we and it's in your handout too, but we created a one-page Google document outlining the day with hyperlinks to everything that the faculty would need. Right? We didn't want, our goal was to not have them have to type links incorrectly into their system or navigate through a lot of file structures to find the documents that they needed. So we really tried to create immediate 1 or 2 click access off the navigation guide and then put it in order very simply so they could follow it and find their way. So that was, and we spent a lot of time in advance, which you really have to do, sort of figuring out where are all the documents going to live and then hooking them up because people are virtual, and because they're virtual, they don't really, they really need an anchor. And so that navigation guide was our anchor. One of the problems we ran into right away with the Zoom rooms and having to have we needed 125 breakout rooms so 250 people could pair up. And what we learned was that Zoom will only let you have 50 breakout rooms in your session. So, so our solution to that was, and it turns out that we checked I checked to say, what if I get a webinar license where I can have 500 people? It doesn't matter if you have 1,000 people in your Zoom, you can have 50 breakout rooms. So, so what we had to do was we separated people. So we had, as Scott said earlier, we had room hosts. And at the time, when it was time to go to their interviews, we had divided the faculty up alphabetically, and they all jumped from the navigation guide into a different Zoom meeting, and there was a host waiting for them. And then once they were all there, that host broke them out into pairs randomly. Okay? So we had to have an extra set of hands to do that. And then in those rooms, those hosts kept them for all of day one. So as we talk about day one, they were in that, we called it a workroom. We called our big room the main room, like it was a conference. And we called our separate Zoom rooms workrooms. And we sent people off into those workrooms where the host would work with them. And the host instructions were typed up and created in Google, and the host instructions will also be in your handout. So you can see how we managed that with our hosts. So that's how we got around the bear. So if you're going to do this with more than 100 people, recognize that you're not going to be able to do paired interviews in one Zoom room. But actually, because we put the links to those alternate rooms.
I'll put this up, John. Does that help?
Yeah, see, all they had to do then was, if I'm going to be in the Gary Flynn workroom, if I'm between Adams and Zerwinski, then I know I'm in Gary Flynn's room, and I'm just going to click where it says Zoom link, and it will just jump them right into that meeting. They don't have to leave this meeting and go. Zoom will come up and say, this will take you out of your current meeting into the next meeting, and you say yes, and then you hop right into that room.
But Gary Flynn, Gary had to open a Zoom meeting himself.
Yes.
So that means that link was preset, of course, in Gary's account, which was still Gateway's account because they have an enterprise account. But Gary Flynn was able to go in and open a room and be sitting there waiting for them to arrive.
Right. So you will need that other person to open a separate Zoom meeting and give you the hyperlink to that meeting. And then you can put it in your navigation guide. So that worked really well for us because we were able to just have them jump directly into the room. Again, we're trying to minimize the opportunity for people to get lost. And we still had a few, but for most of the case, people were able to get around that. And yes, so that was a live link. That room was open, and anyone who clicked on it would go directly into that room. And then again, because we needed to keep communication open, we also used an instant messaging platform. We used Google Chat, again, because that's what the college uses. But we set up a separate way for Scott and I, as the main facilitators, to communicate with those room hosts in case when everybody got there, they had a problem. So that seemed to work out really well.
Post this, I've done this again with all of the employees at another community college in Illinois, and we split up. They had smaller, a little bit smaller groups. They had 50, 75 in a group. So I could do it in one Zoom meeting. However, they aren't a Google school. They don't normally use Google. We communicated amongst the couple of us that were quote unquote facilitators by text, and we still use Google Docs, and it worked brilliantly. As a matter of fact, now the school goes, why aren't we using this? So you don't have to be a Google Suite organization to use the Google Docs. Whoever designs it has to have a Google account, of course, but the whole world probably has a Google account these days. But they can log in even if they don't have a Google account. It doesn't matter. Keep in mind, as John said, and I'll just say it one more time, when you create a Google Doc, you must set the shared settings to allow anybody with the link to join that document. Otherwise, you would be within the Google Suite, right? And you would limit people, and then you run in during the days. Well, I can't get into the document. Okay. Okay, so we did randomly pair faculty with another member in a breakout room. We asked them to take turns being interviewed. We gave them 25 minutes for each side of the interview. Again, the Appreciative Inquiry guide is in your handout, so you can actually see all of the questions. We used those questions, and we talk about being active listeners and why that's important, that it's an interview, not a dialogue. They need to follow the questions. It's not just a conversation. We'll have plenty of time for dialogue later, but this is an interview. We encourage them to keep track of time. Now, one of the great things about having a host and having virtual is it's really easy to send a note into the breakout rooms that says it's time to rotate. You know, you have 10 minutes left, you have 5 minutes left, you have 1 minute left. It's really easy to send a note out to your breakout rooms. So I understand in the live ones with large groups, I've had as many as 400 in a room. You know, you're on a microphone and you're kind of talking over everybody to do that. This is a little more subtle way of dropping the notifications about time limits and stuff in there. We asked them then to complete the summary sheet at the end of the inquiry guide, which gives them the notes from their interviews that they can consolidate to be ready for the story sharing that we're going to do next. Okay. Then we have them exit the breakout room, but stay in that sub Zoom room or that workout room that we talked about. Okay. They'll remain there in that host room. They didn't come back to the big room yet, to the main room yet. So here's the just a picture of the front page of the inquiry guide. You all, I'm sure, create your own inquiry guides with your own style, and they're all great. You know that. What it looks like is more personal choice than anything else. But we ask questions around these categories. We ask some introduction questions. What's your experience with Gateway? Why are you here? What keeps you here? Core values, teaching and learning, professional development, engagement, educational equity, and vision for the future, all connected to the excellence in teaching and learning specifically. So how do you define it? How important is professional development, or what kind of professional development best supports that? How do you build engagement around teaching and learning? How do you get equity? And of course, their 3 dreams for the future, right? Their idea of a preferred future for that. John, you in theme worksheets next, is that right?
Yes, right. So our next step after this, and this is another logistical issue we had, you know, in a regular AI, you would just say, okay, pairs stay together and then join up with 2 or 3 other pairs, form a group of 6 or 8 for this activity. In order to make sure that that happened in the virtual world, our room hosts had to actually manually update the breakout rooms. So that was probably the most difficult thing we asked our hosts to do as we transitioned to the second activity, is they had to go through all the pairs that they had created, and keeping the pairs together, they had to move them into breakout rooms of 6 to 8 people. So we basically gave everybody a break after the paired interviews, and during that break, our room hosts were able to reorganize the breakout rooms for this next activity. And like I say, that was and that was another reason why we had 6 groups like this, because I told you, you know, with 100 people you can do 50 breakouts, but then you've got 100 people you have to try to reorganize on the fly. So we decided breaking it up into smaller work rooms would make it a little easier on the hosts when they had to go through that exercise of regrouping everybody. So they did the regrouping, and then we created worksheets, because this is the first point where you'd use a flip chart. So anywhere we thought we'd be using a flip chart, we turned it into a worksheet. And that worksheet, which we'll show you in a minute, that worksheet allowed them to gather all of their ideas and communicate them. One of the things we'll talk about as we go through here, there were basically two kinds of worksheets, and we'll talk about this as they come up. But some of them we wanted to retain. We wanted to have them in our possession after the workshop. And so for those, we actually had to create them prior to the workshop and put them in a file structure in Google, which I also have. It's also explained in the handout how the file structure worked. So they all had to navigate to that specific document and work in that document where it lived. There are some other worksheets that we were kind of considered disposable. So we allowed people to just make their own copy of that worksheet and then transfer the information to our master. So I'll talk about how we did that as we go, but we had to make a decision as we were going through creating. It's basically like you do in a regular AI, which flip charts are we going to save and which flip charts can we throw away? But we had to make all those decisions in advance.
I'll go back just very, very briefly to finish that comment, John, just so everybody understood. And I just want to make sure it was clear. We had to create theme worksheets that when they clicked there, it went to a document that or a file. They were in a folder that first they would be able to connect, like Flynn room 1, Flynn room 2, Flynn room 3. So they were able to then select the breakout room that they were assigned to, if that makes sense. Okay, just so you understand how that worked. Because it was a lot of documents, but you just copy them and rename them, and it didn't take that long.
And we knew in advance how many of those we needed, because we knew how many faculty were being sent to each room, and then when they were broken into groups of 6 or 8, we knew how many groups that would make. So we were able to create each of those documents, and then they had to. And then they navigate. Thank you, Scott. Then they had to navigate to those.
And we create a couple of extra in each room just in case, and it worked out fine. The hosts were not Appreciative Inquiry certified necessarily, so to be able to give instruction to the participants in those 6 various rooms, John and I couldn't run around all 6 rooms real quick. So I created a short video, right, through Camtasia is what I use. You can use whatever you want. I use Camtasia, and then I created into a YouTube that has hidden access. And we had this available for the host. So when they regathered after their interviews, before they went back out to do their sharing stories and hit those theme sheets, they watched this very short. I'm not going to show it to you. You can access it, but the link is in the handouts. But if it gave them the instructions on what we wanted them to do: go around the room, 2-3 minutes each, share the high points from the stories, collect that on your theme sheet, and sort those, come up with the top 3 themes, put those on the master sheet. So all the instructions were in this little video. Here were the instructions. Again, you guys that do this is remedial for you, I understand, but we had them briefly share that, use their summary sheet for their notes. We just didn't want them to repeat the entire story that they'd heard, but the high points or themes. We ask a recorder to list all the high points. Now, I will tell you what a lot of the groups did is, because it's Google Docs, everybody in the group had the Google Doc open. So they were co-creating, which was really fascinating to watch, because of course, John and I could look in on any of those documents and watch it being developed. And so it'd be like watching the flip chart being filled out in the room. And it was fascinating because they were taking turns writing and they were sharing. And I only noticed a couple of groups that truly had a recorder that did all the writing onto a worksheet. And that allowed the recorder to participate better. I thought it was fascinating. I really enjoyed how they worked together to do that. We gave them and warned them time is critical, as you know. So we made it really clear that they had only about 45 minutes to do that. So here's an example of the worksheet. John, you going to chat about this a little bit?
Right. So this is a worksheet. And one of the first things we did ask them to give us their names. And we really did that because we felt that it created some ownership of the work. and we did that. You'll see that as we go through. We, not that those were published anywhere, but we could go back and we could, they could see that this is the group that they were in. If anybody's, well, I was in this group, I want to see what we did, we would have that. So we did ask them to list the names on the worksheet and then just do the brainstorming. And so we gave them space, and it's a Google Doc, so it can get bigger and they can all see it, whether one person's sharing their screen or whether they're all in the Google Doc, they can all see it. And then they could, like Scott said, collaborate. Scott, if you click through that one.
Next one.
There
Sorry,
we
I should have
go.
clicked
So
through
you
it,
can-
shouldn't I?
That's cool. And then what we did is, this was another navigation tip, is we embedded the hyperlink to the next step in the worksheets. So you can see that after they wrote down what the top 3 themes were, there's a hyperlink right there on the screen, right there on the form, that takes them to the master document. So they didn't have to go back to the navigation guide to click to their next tool. So where possible, we tried to embed those links again, so that it was just an obvious path, so nobody got lost. Okay. So Scott, if you click through that, I think you can see, yeah, they got their themes, and then that took them right to the next document. And then this was a master document that we created again, that everybody went to, and this was the entire 250 faculty members. So everyone came to the same document. Again, they had to find their workroom name and their group number, and they had to enter their 3 names, or enter their 3 themes. So what was really interesting is, as people were wrapping up and doing this, again, they could all see everybody filling in the form at the same time, which is really, it kind of creates some energy and excitement, where they can see, oh, everybody's typing their themes on here. What did they say? What did they say? I will tell you that for someone like me, who's just a little bit OCD and wants it all to be perfect and beautiful, some of the groups wrote outside the lines. Some of them took more space than we wanted. So it doesn't come out beautiful, but neither does a flip chart. So, I think it comes out looking exactly how it's supposed to look. Yep. But everybody was able to everyone was able to put their themes in, and that allowed us to then end up with one master document of all the key themes that everybody came up with, which took us, and that was the end of day 1, as far as their activities went.
All right.
And we did it that way because Scott and I knew we would need some time in between. Deborah, yeah.
Question. I got lost.
Okay.
You guys are doing a great job, but I got lost. And where I got lost was when you have the host doing the breakout rooms, and they in turn create the pairs conversation. It's like breaking out.
Yes. Okay,
I got that part. The part I didn't get was when you're asking the breakout room host to, in real time, create like a group of 6. Yep. Because when you're setting up Zoom, you can pre-set breakout rooms, but when you do it, and I got that you gave them a break so that they could do that, but I don't know how to, in real time, set up a combined.
Here's how we did it, Deborah. It's actually pretty easy. I do it all the time because I do a lot of virtual work with larger groups, not necessarily all Appreciative Inquiry, is that once they're done with their interviews, they're all back in the master breakout room dialog box, right? We had the hosts record the names on a piece of paper of the pairs, right? So they knew who their pairs were. So, Sally and Jim and Bob and George and they had those, gave them their break. They then quite easily, you take the name and drag it into the room number. So we went from having, say there were 20 people in the room, you needed 10, there more than that. Say there were 50 in the room, you needed 25 breakout rooms. Well, now you're going to put them in groups of 6 or 8. You're only going to need 4 breakout rooms or 5 breakout rooms, right, to get your numbers. So you literally can take each name and just click on it, and it will say, put them in room 1, put them in room 2, put them in room 3. So you took your handwritten sheet, took your first 3 pairs and wrote room 1, your next 3 pairs wrote room 2. You had all that done. So it was as quick. I'm telling you, you could do all of them in 30 seconds because you had their names and the room number you're sending them to. And as soon as you do, you hit go. So when they come out, you hit recreate, which gives you a new platform to do it on. You literally assign each one of them to the room based on your written notes that you took.
Thanks.
And their
Okay, does
names
that help?
and their names stay, yeah, their names actually stay there when you do the recreate. So you just basically, as Scott said, just go and grab a pair and move them into a room with another pair and just keep doing that until the rooms fill up.
Yep.
And the recreate button, I'm sorry, is really basic, but where's the recreate button?
It's right on the breakout room deal. Let's see. I don't, you know, there's one of the problems that I'm going to suggest with Zoom is I don't think if I do this right now, you can't see a breakout room on your screen, can you?
No.
It won't let me show what I'm doing in Zoom. Isn't that crazy? Like
You know what,
I actually have the breakout room module on my screen right in front of you, and it won't show it.
Well, you know why? It's because I'm not a co-host. If
Right,
you
I
made-
know. But I thought maybe if it's just one of my complaints about Zoom is I'd like to be able to find an easy way to share what I'm doing on Zoom with somebody.
Yeah,
because
Scott, we'll have to talk about that because there is a setting. I don't know if maybe I have it because I have an enterprise system.
Maybe so.
There is a setting that I have in the back of it. I can show my Zoom windows.
At the bottom of the page, Deborah, when you have you'll have room or whatever, and then or the names. At the bottom, it says recreate. It says options, and then it says recreate right there. It says add a room right there, and it says open all rooms right there. So the recreate button's pretty easy to find.
Thank you so much for your.
Oh, absolutely. That's why we're here. Questions are critical here. So jump right in. Okay.
May I make a suggestion that
Sure.
it takes one step out of your process, and that is you don't need to write down all the names manually. As soon as the teams are in their rooms, people are in their rooms, take a screenshot.
Yeah.
You have it right there on your desktop. You can actually see the names right from the.
Yep. Yeah, works
Hard
too.
to write down 50 names, but it's easy to take a screenshot.
Yeah, I think there's an export feature too, but yeah, we told our hosts that, but just to keep track, because otherwise if you just try to do it sort of free form, you can lose track of who the pairs were when you start moving people around.
The hosts are sitting there for 50 minutes during the interviews with nothing to do anyway.
Right.
So it gave them a little something to stay engaged.
But yeah, good point, Mary.
So what John and I then did was here's the results. Here's a cutout or a screenshot of some of the results that we got from their breakout rooms, their themes they collected. We then sort of shoved them together, tried to edit only in the degree that we couldn't have over hundreds of them. So there were a lot of crossover. There's a lot of duplicate. So what we did is we then took those themes and created them into this fairly large 14 category list of what we called at that point the communities of interest. That's John and I doing that work. We had overnight to do it. We certainly got it done within the first hour because, as you'll see, we're going to send out a voting system in a minute. But we were able to take these with our spreadsheet and be able to work with them very easily to sort them, to move them around. He and I are on a document just moving stuff around until we group them into very similar topics and then created these communities of interest. So that's the facilitator work to do that. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So that was sort of the time. Yeah. That was sort of the time sensitive part. As Scott and I had to jump in right after their session ended, we went in, did our own affinity with those themes, came up with our categories that were going to go on the survey. And then we used Google Forms, another Google tool that the college uses for basic survey creation. It doesn't have really great analytics, but we didn't really need high-end analytics. It was fine. And we wanted to recreate that activity that you would do on paper where you give everybody 3 dots and you tell them to walk around and put their dots by what they have the most energy. So we had to come up with a way to do virtual dots. And you can see the, very small on the screen. I think it says evaluation grid or something like that, the type of question.
Checkerboard grid, is that what you're looking for? Checkerbox grid? Yeah.
Checkbox grid, that's what we did. And so what we did is we put the survey together, and in the survey, we hyperlinked out to the document that Scott just said, the one we created that said, these are the headings. And then we listed what was under those headings. So nothing was lost. So if you didn't understand what this heading was, you could go see what the themes were that contributed to that heading. So everybody had all of that input, just as if they were looking at all the flip charts from the AI. And then they had 3 dots or 3 check marks that they could make. And the way this particular survey works is there were 3 columns, as you'll see in a second, and they could only make 1 check mark per column. So if somebody wanted to put all 3 of their dots on faculty support, they could check faculty support in every column. Or they could spread their 3 dots out, but they could only make 1 check in column 1 and 1 check in column 2 and 1 check in column 3. And that was how we asked them to vote. Scott and I got the survey together, I think within an hour after the session, and then we sent it out and we gave people, I think, until 4 p.m., which was the end of the in-service day, because they were in other in-service workshops that afternoon. We gave them until the end of the day, 4 or 5 p.m., to finish the survey. We had to do that. They had to finish the survey on the first day, because Scott and I then had to take the top 6 answers and go in and do some renaming of some of the elements in the second room. Now, we didn't get everybody. We didn't get 250 responses. I think we got maybe about half of the people actually did the survey. Mm-hmm. But again, the right people are the ones who participate, and what you get is what you get. So the people who had an interest, who were interested in voting, voted on the survey. And I had a few emails during the day of people who didn't quite understand the instructions, but for the most part, it went very smoothly. And people were able, even though they weren't in our room, in our control anymore, we were able to get them to do the survey. And then this is a graphic representation of the results. And it didn't really matter how many people put .1 or .2 or .3 on an answer, but you can see visually which ones were popular. And we also were able to see the actual numbers. So we had a list, we actually got to see the physical numbers, so we could see what the top 6 answers were.
If you hover your cursor over that on the live document, it gives you the number of votes, even though it's also obviously on the axis there.
Right. And then that allowed us to go in, and name the communities of interest for the next day. So people would know what the 6 options were when we got to day 2. And we had to go in. So in the handout, one of the first things you'll see is sort of the presenter's outline, and there's a notes column. And I think I made a note of, after day 1, go in and rename information in these documents. So I had a little to-do list ready so I could go in and make those document changes for the second day. And that was day 1.
Okay.
Yes, Google does, and Google does automatically create Google will automatically give you a list of the responses and how many people gave each one.
Yes, you could even, if you ask them for email or name, which we didn't, you could even attach responses to individuals.
Right. We didn't.
So on day 1, they were never all together in the main Zoom room.
Not again. They were together. Well, they were together at the very beginning when we introduced. And then we did have them come back at the end so that we could explain the survey to all of them at once.
Right.
But that's so they came back at the end of day 1 so we could explain the affinity survey, but then we dismissed them.
And the president of the college
was he day 1?
Joined us that afternoon.
Right. That wasn't our plan. He was supposed to be on the second day.
Right. But he came, and which was perfect, because he is able to close our first day and thank them for being there and engage them. It, as you know, just to put it in context, the primary campus is in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and this was only a few days after the shooting there. So there was a lot of tension around other things going on. And I'm going to suggest that the feedback I got, anecdotal feedback at least, and we'll show you the formal feedback, was that this was a distraction and it was a pleasant one. In other words, they were able to do something positive in thinking, and it wasn't just worried about what was going on in the community that day. And the president was able to speak to that. And I thought that was really well timed. It was just, fortuitous that kind of stuff happens. But yes, we brought them together and closed it for the day. We wouldn't let them just go away from being spread out. Bringing back was important. Yeah. We then moved at the beginning of day 2. Our primary goal was to do a SOAR, and we certainly had them all in one room to describe how we were going to do this before we sent them out, and you'll see that. I will mention a little bit about SOAR, but again, you all have the experience. So here were the community of interest. I don't know why I still have the animation on there, but there it is. Okay, so these were the community of interest groups that got the highest number of votes, and these are the number of votes they got. So we published this. This is actually the slide that the participants saw that morning. So they were now able to self-select on their own, the topic in which they would like to participate in. Okay, so they were going to do a SOAR, and then obviously the rest of the afternoon would have been built around a lot of the SOAR information from these topics. So they selected one of these topics to spend the next hour or so on in conducting in a group of people a SOAR. And again, with so many people, we're not going to have 6 topics. Divide that into 250 is too many people. So we did the same thing. We put them back out into host's room, and then we're broken down into smaller breakout rooms. So we would have, 6 or 8, 10 in a breakout room so that they all could participate. As you know, even in live situations where you're around a table, some people can get left out. It's pretty easy to just get forgotten because there's some dominant voices. We still face that in virtual world, but the smaller the group, a little more likely you are to get complete engagement. So this was a chance for us to do it in smaller groups, and it worked out really well that way.
So on this one, then you can see the navigation guide for day 2. You can see we had to put the community of interest themes right on the navigation guide. They had, again, their Zoom link to go to the room. And, we had to do it this way too, so we could have self-selection. So they could go to whichever room they wanted. And the only way at that time we could do that was to have, again, 6 live Zoom meetings open with hosts in them waiting, and then have people say, I want to go in this room or this room or this room. Now, if you have the most up-to-date version of Zoom, it has the option of participants being able to self-select. You can just give them 6 breakout rooms and say, go wherever you want. We still wouldn't have been able to do it that way, because once everybody got into that room, then it's just one room. You can't subdivide a breakout room.
Well, John, let me clarify that. What Zoom has now allowed you to do is allow people to self-select, and you have to set that up in your account settings. But once you've done that, you can have them self-select a breakout room.
Right.
What we would have had to have is a small enough group for us to only have them pick from these 6 topics and go into a breakout room. We couldn't have had them sub-broken, right? That had to be done this way. There's no way to do that. But many of you are working with smaller groups, and you're still doing it virtually. Right. Just let them self-select. And if your numbers are way out of whack, then you can either go in and ask people to move, or you can go in quickly and create a second room. That's not hard to do.
Right. So yeah, I was going to say that was just because of the size of the group, again, having the separate work rooms, because then once they got into that workroom, once everybody got into the ethics, trust, honesty discussion, then the host could look at how many he had and break them up.
Do it
randomly into groups, again, smaller groups, 6 or 8 people, just so everybody would feel like they could talk.
Yep.
So that was again a host task once everybody got there. But as Scott said, absolutely, if you're working with a smaller group and you just want them to self-select a room to be in, and you're not worried about those rooms being overcrowded, then you don't need to have them leave. You can keep them in your main group and just have them self-select. Now, in order for that to work, everyone in the group has to have the most up-to-date version of Zoom. I think it's version 5.3 or higher. I'm not 100% sure. But if anybody who has an older version of Zoom will not see that feature. So if you're thinking of using that feature, just be cautious. You might have some people who say, I don't see the options, and then you're going to have to put them in rooms the old way. Right. It's a fairly recent, I think they added that feature, after last August, because we didn't have it available when we did our session, but it was added after that.
They returned back to the big room, of course, but what I have here, by the way, these slides are here, and I'm even going to mention them because the sessions I've been in prior and I've conducted for the center prior had people that had minimal appreciative inquiry experience. So I wanted to make sure we at least talked about what we did. But some of you that do SOAR all the time, just tune out for about 30 seconds here and you'll be fine. So we did give them about 15 minutes for strengths. Here are the questions that we ask. You will write your own. You'll probably write them better than we did, but we wanted to know what's working, what the strengths are, what the greatest assets and resources are. We then, of course, had aspirations. These are their slides that they actually saw. Opportunities for growth, improvement, change. What should we do more of? What should we do less of? What should we do different? And then, of course, aspirations. What are the highest aspirations for teaching and learning? What's our preferred future look like? When teaching and learning is its best, how is it different than today? And then how do we measure, right? What results do we expect to get? How will we know when we've succeeded? And how should we measure that? So those are our SOAR questions. You'll write your own. I understand that. These are in the handout. They're on the slides. You're welcome to use them, but you may come up with some that are much, much better than what you had there. But we needed to capture all that SOAR information on a document. So John, tell us how we did that.
All right. So again, didn't have a flip chart. So we created a worksheet. Now, this was one of those situations where, because we didn't, in the first day, we knew exactly how many worksheets we would need for the theme collection activity, because we knew how many pairs were going to be in each room and how many small. So we had that all set with just a few extras. We didn't know if 10 people or 100 people were going to go to any one of those sessions. So what we decided to do was make this one of those disposable sheets. I'll tell you how we did that in a minute. But so you can see on the sheet that, well, actually, I'll tell you right now. So what we did is basically, the link that we had on the navigation guide. If you go into a sharing link on Google and you find the word edit in the string and you change the word edit to copy, so it's all mixed in there with a bunch of other characters around it. But if you find the word edit toward the end and you change that to copy, then when somebody clicks on that link, Google will not show them the document. It will say, would you like to create a copy of this document? So they could not corrupt our master. And the copy that they made then stayed in their own personal Google account, which means we would not get to see it. But that's okay. Again, we didn't want this document. We wanted the results of this document. So that way, we didn't know how many of those sheets we would need. So instead of making a bunch of copies that we weren't going to use, we just made it as a copyable sheet instead, kind of a disposable flip chart. So they went in, so a recorder, somebody went in, and maybe more than one went in and created a copy, but they wouldn't all be in this. On day one, they would have all been in the same document. So if
this is just their worksheet. This was their chance to take some notes and chat.
Yeah.
Because as you know, we asked them for their 3 highest level strengths, 3 opportunities, 3 aspirations, and 3 results to report to the master group.
Okay. So whoever was the note taker then, again, wrote down what their theme was, wrote down their group names, they brainstormed the SOAR, and then again, we embedded the navigation to the next step right in this worksheet. So after they filled out that page of their top 3 ideas for each element of SOAR, then they were able to just click through the link and it took them to a master file. And each community of interest had a master document like this. And we had actually, we sort of guessed, if everybody kind of parsed themselves out equally, they probably wouldn't have more than 5 breakout groups. But we did tell the hosts, if you end up with way more than 5 breakout rooms, message me back. And while they're doing their SOAR, I'll go into the master document for your room and I'll add more rows. So by the time they were done with their SOAR, our master document for each separate community of interest had the right number of lines on it, so that each group then went in and one row is their answer. So breakout room number 1 in this community of interest filled in 3 strengths, 3 opportunities, 3 aspirations, 3 results. I think I actually the night before went into all of these documents and replaced community of interest theme with the actual community
with the actual name. It doesn't say column theme 1 SOAR results. It had the actual community of interest was the title on this document.
Right. So I actually did that the night before. So when they went into the document, they'd know they were in the right place. But they just filled in a cross.
So it looked like this.
And so then with 6 communities of interest, we ended up with 6 sheets that looked like this. So this was the one for the adaptability, flexibility, and innovation group. And each breakout room was then able to put in their SOAR.
Okay.
And then at that point, they left. That was the last thing they did in the outside room. Then we had them all come back to the main room, because everything else from this point on, we could do with 250 people in one Zoom room. We didn't need that subdivision anymore. So we were able to bring them back to the main room where Scott and I facilitated the rest of the workshop. And this is where we moved on to the provocative propositions.
Right. And we, at that point, we randomly distributed them again into breakout rooms, about the same size as their SOAR groups were. So, you know, somewhere in that 6 to 8 to 10 area. What we asked them to do was to create a provocative proposition, a statement that bridges the best of what is with their own speculation of what might be. We gave them a suggestion. We talked about provocative propositions needing to be exciting. They stretch and they challenge, although they're realistic. They're desired, that they do represent our true highest hopes, not fears at this point. And we want them to describe, what they want in a positive way. We want it written in the present tense, like it's already happening, so that they are solid, strong statements. We gave them the option, and I communicated this verbally to them, that if they had an idea of how to write this their own way, they could. There was no restriction. However, if they were struggling at all to get started, they could consider finishing this sentence of excellence in teaching and learning a gateway requires, and they could finish it. Maybe half, maybe a little more than half actually used this sentence as the way they created their propositions. The other, 40% or so created something that didn't have this language in their provocative proposition. But they worked together to then create that on another document that was not necessary to fill out, but had a link at the bottom to send it to the master. John, you want to?
Right.
It's the same.
So again, that was that was one of those disposables. So we edited the link so it said copy instead of edit. And so we didn't collect, because that sheet really, all it had was the explanation of provocative proposition and a little space for them to draft. So we didn't save that one. We saved this one. So this again was a master that each group in the room came back to. And we knew how many groups we were going to probably have to create. So we just numbered on the sheet and they just found their group number. I would say that was like one thing that kept saying over and over again is remember your breakout room number.
Yeah.
Whenever we put you in a breakout room, remember your room number, because everything was key to knowing your breakout room number. So that if they don't remember what breakout room they're in, then the whole thing falls apart.
But it didn't. Because
a
couple of them didn't know their number, and they would say, well, look, somebody already wrote number 5 and we were number 5. So they just created a new line and wrote it. We didn't care. I mean, to be honest,
Scott didn't care.
I didn't care at all. And because I just want the information, I don't care which room they were in. But now further back when they're trying to get into their interviews and stuff, maybe a little more, but here, it was like, just get the provocative propositions on a sheet and we'll be fine. And if you looked at the master after it was done, there's several in there that they added something because they couldn't find the number, and it was fine. We were able to put it up in about 2 minutes. So it worked.
But that was another nice situation where, again, they could all in real time see what everybody else was writing on so it all just kind of blew.
Right.
So I think those moments create a lot of energy. They could, after they typed their sentence, they could stay in the document and see what other people were typing, and it got people. It's sort of the equivalent of that gallery walk. So you can do that. You have to find those times where people can be together in a document and see the material coming together.
Right.
But so then we end up. So then Scott and I then had that one list of all the provocative propositions that we could work from.
Yep. And then our next step in this, after those propositions were written, was to talk about strategic intentions and actions. And again, this sent them out to a worksheet to do that. I made the decision, I guess, is that we actually put them in the same rooms they were in for their propositions. We could have resorted them easily. We didn't.
Sure.
We thought they've written their proposition, we'll leave them in there together to do this. Some of you might even keep the SOAR groups together all the way through. I've done that, where you do your SOAR on a community of interest, and then you do your propositions right as part of the SOAR. And then you do your creative or strategic intentions and actions with the same group. You decide that, how you want to mix them up and move them around. That's obviously personal preference to do that. And there's advantages to both. I've done them both ways. And this one, we decided just to leave them with the provocative proposition folks. So what we asked them to do is, thinking of the work that they've done, as a group, we like to come up with 2 or 3 creative and innovative strategic intentions or actions. And then we asked them to tell us a little bit how we're all going to make this happen. What are the things we need to do? And we want them to be creative and innovative. We defined a strategic intention as an aspirational target, and went action as the steps toward a vision. So they could put either one or both. We didn't care. We just needed input as to what they thought should be next. And as you know, some people think strategically from a broader why kind of perspective, and some are very process oriented folks, and we wanted to give them the opportunity to do that as well. So both options are there, and we got a kind of a mix of the stuff. And some actually very purposely said these are intentions and these are actions, and some just wrote their responses, and it was all good because we got that information for the caucus to be able to work from, and it was really well done that way. Record on a worksheet. Yep, go ahead. Just wrote it in there.
Yeah, so now this was a keeper. We wanted to keep this worksheet. We didn't make them.
This was the copy, because wasn't the last one, didn't they put that? Oh no, you're right. We decided not to do that. You're right. Sorry.
Yeah, this was a keeper because we didn't want them to have to transfer those to another step. So basically, so what we did is, again, we figured we'd have about 33 breakout rooms. And so we created 33 copies of this and numbered them. So again, you just went to the document for your breakout room number and you open it. And I want to remind you that everything, all of these tools that we're mentioning were all accessed from the navigation guide. So for each step, we took people back to the navigations guide and said, okay, now we're at this step, click here, and it will go to the document that you need. So this one, when they clicked the navigation guide, took them into a Google folder that had group 1 worksheet, group 2 worksheet, group 3 worksheet, and they just opened their worksheet. That's what you're seeing here, and they filled it out. So this was one that we kept. Okay. The one previously, like I said, that was the one where we made the little copy, and they just kept that themselves. Okay.
I just happen to notice chat room too. I just want to make sure that we're covering everything you've got there. We're fine on time here, I think. Yes, we closed. The community of interest rooms were closed. We did not connect, and I think I said this, but we did not connect the communities of interest to the SOAR, or I'm sorry, to the provocative propositions. We did to the SOAR. It said beside the virtual dimension, why'd you integrate SOAR in the process? Well, I love SOAR. It brings to me more information about the outcomes, and it drives those propositions, and it drives those strategic initiatives for me. So when I'm doing an inquiry, I will suggest one of the most important pieces is to have some discussion for me around those topics, around strengths and aspirations and opportunities and results. I understand everybody does it differently, and there's a million ways to do appreciative thinking and appreciative programming. I don't in any way want you to think this is the way to do it or the only way. I do appreciative inquiry in a lot of different ways depending on the size of the group and the need, but I try to always integrate some kind of a discussion around what are our current strengths and what are our aspirations and how will we know we got there. So that's why that's there. And yes, the documents are all in the handout, which is either in the chat room or is in the on the website that I gave you, and I'll give it to you again before we leave if you need it. Okay.
But somebody else asked, Scott, and yes, so after the communities of interest, when they came back to the provocative propositions and we randomly grouped them, that did mean that people from different communities of interest were doing provocative propositions together. And we talked about that we talked about whether we should keep them together, but we didn't want a provocative proposition just for your narrow topic. We wanted a provocative proposition for the big inquiry topic of excellence in teaching and learning. And so we thought if we intermixed those people who had been in different SOARs and brought them together to talk about the provocative proposition, we get a little cross-pollination. Now, one of the things that you would probably do, and that we would do in a physical session, is we might stop and we might ask each, if we had time, ask each group of community of interest to present their top SOAR ideas. Or we might have them hang up those flip charts with the top 3 ideas, and we might do a gallery walk. So we actually talked about, should we take the time to virtually display all of those community of interest master source sheets on Google or on Zoom and kind of let people look them over. But then we realized that just logistically expecting everybody to read those on their screen, for multiple SOAR results in multiple communities of interest, we thought it would just be overwhelming.
Right.
So we did have to sacrifice that, but by mixing the people up in the breakout rooms, we got some of that. Well, we talked about ethics and we talked about diversity, and then that would all sort of come together. And you could see that in the provocative propositions that they wrote, that they got themselves back up to that macro level where we wanted them to be.
And they did get all of the SOAR propositions and intentions in the final report, and everybody that participated got a copy of that. So it took us 10 days to get it together and send it out, but they got a copy of every detail that you're seeing here today in terms of their input was done. And yes, Deborah, you asked about the navigation sheet. Yes, we encouraged them to keep that open during the entire time.
Right, that was sort of their homepage.
Link. Yep. I did this, by the way, at another college that used Canvas. And so instead of having a separate navigation sheet, they use Canvas at their college. So all of these Google Doc links and Zoom links were embedded in a module inside Canvas, which is an LMS platform. Some of you may know. Some use Canvas, some use Blackboard, some use Google Moogle or whatever, but they use Canvas. So we were able to use that because that's where they put their entire in-service week was embedded into their Canvas programming. We asked for commitments, which were individual submissions about how they will help make that happen. Up till that point, we've been talking about the group and the college. To be honest, a lot of the strategic initiative and actions had to do with the administration should do this. And so we needed individual commitments as well to try to get some energy around the topic. And so we asked them to offer 3 or 4 gifts, commitments, or requests. A gift so that they could offer, a commitment, something that they could do without help from anybody else, or a request that somebody else could do to support one of the strategic intentions that you were thinking was important. And we collected those in a Google form, again, much like we did the voting.
Right. So this again was a very simple Google survey. Now this was not anonymous because when they're making a commitment, we want them to be something they're willing to put their name on. So we did collect names, and then we asked them, what would your gift be? What would your commitment be? What would your request be? And then because we were also trying to launch the Faculty Teaching and Learning Caucus, we asked people if they would like to self-nominate. Now, the caucus members were elected by the faculty in each of the 6 divisions or schools within our college. So, but we wanted to also use the survey where people could say, yes, I would like to be a caucus member. And then we were able to share those names back with the deans. And then the deans could conduct those caucus elections in their department meetings and then tell us who their caucus representatives were going to be. So that's obviously not part of your process, but as long as we were doing a survey at the end of the, process, we wanted to include that. And it's just another commitment that people could make. They could nominate themselves. And you'll see on the next slide then what we got back. And whenever you do a Google form, you can automatically create that spreadsheet. Somebody asked that earlier, if it does it automatically. When you're looking at the results, you can look at the results in Google Forms, or you can just click a button and it will generate a Google spreadsheet with every comment. So we actually got this nice chart showing us everybody's name and what gifts and commitments and requests they had made. And this was, again, very useful for the Faculty Teaching and Learning Caucus. And it was also very useful. We shared it with we told them we were going to share it with the administration too. So if you offered to do something, we might take you up on it, which I think is really valuable.
This was a really valuable document. By the way, I've covered up their names and email addresses for this because there's no reason to publish that for you. So that's why that's covered up there. Normally it would be there. And these are 3 examples. An example of a gift, a commitment, and a request that was actually submitted, just so you could, because that's small reading if you're trying to read that little bits that's there. So yeah, I'm telling you, the final document here that went out to administration with, for instance, the executive team I'm working with was really powerful because there was some really good information in it from individuals. It gave them a chance to communicate in a way. And then we, through that's a Google Doc or a Google form as well, we conducted a feedback survey. And John, there were more questions than this, but this is an example, an example of some of the comments that we had that came back. So we did ask if it was easy to follow, was it meaningful, were they able to contribute, the value of it overall, and as you'll see, the numbers were pretty positive as a whole. I think we always understand that there'll be some people that don't. The room's always too cold, it's always too hot. But I was really happy with our numbers of positive feedback. Now, again, we got 121 out of 248 responses. Can we assume the other 125 or 150, whatever, were unhappy? I don't know. How that works with surveying. And you'll notice that most, I just cut and pasted some comments, but you'll notice there's one at the bottom was very real. He said, "Don't waste my time like this again." And we had a few of those. We had some.
And we always do.
Yeah, and we had some that said, "Don't ever, let me pick who I want to talk to because there were people in my room that I didn't want to talk to," or something. And okay, there's some of that. There always is. Here's one. There's a lot of negativity in my group. So I wanted to put goods and bads on this list so you can see that we got all of it. We didn't just get positive, but overall, it was easy to follow. They enjoyed it. We got a lot of feedback about that doing it on Zoom was great, that the navigation guides were helpful. And you saw that first one, most engaging activity they've ever participated in any professional development workshop.
I think one of our difficulties, and we knew this was going to be, we had originally planned, we hadn't planned on COVID. So we were originally going to do this in April of 2019, which would have been the end of the year in service for faculty. And we had been planning, and that's when we were talking about how can we do it paperless and whatever. We had expected to have everybody in an auditorium. And when this happened, we canceled the April in service and we pushed it back. And so now this is August that we were doing this. Our faculty had been virtual since March. Yes, since March. Yep. But we had wrapped up the spring semester as best we could. A lot of faculty didn't teach in summer. So there were a lot of faculty coming back in August, and many of them, what they had on their mind is, how am I possibly going to do this virtual instruction? And there were things, they have an in-service week, and there were lots of workshops during the in-service week about virtual instruction. But there were many people who thought that there should have been nothing else talked about during in-service week except virtual instruction. And then, as Scott said, 1 day prior to this event was when we had a police shooting of an African-American gentleman here in Kenosha. So there was so much happening that was a distraction and a concern from having a really positive, open discussion of teaching and learning. And we knew that. I mean, we didn't know there was going to be a shooting, but we knew everything else was weighing on their minds. But as Scott said, some people viewed it as a welcome distraction, but some people, their mind was just somewhere else, and rightly so. I mean, they were worried about, how am I ever going to use Zoom to teach this class? And they just had a hard time tuning in. I think if we had done this under more peaceful circumstances, less stressful circumstances, I think we would have had different results. But I was very proud of people giving us whatever level of attention and commitment they could. And I think there were some people who said, my partner just couldn't talk about anything positive. All they wanted to do was complain and worry. And I was like, okay, well, that could happen in any AI. I mean, you ask people to buy in and you ask people to commit. And we recognized that the timing wasn't perfect, but we didn't want to delay the Faculty Teaching and Learning Caucus. And so we didn't want to delay the kickoff. We really wanted to keep things normal and rolling, and that was our decision. So it was reflected in the feedback. But I also, like I think, even under those extreme circumstances, there was a tremendous amount of positivity that came out of it. And I think AI does that to people.
I do too, and I think the virtual world worked as well as it can work in this setting. I took the data and create a final report that this is the table of contents. We're not sharing the entire report with you because a lot of it is very college centric, and there's a lot of names and comments in there that probably are internal focused. And if you have interest in some of the data that we collected around the topic, contact me and I'll have a chat with you. I'll certainly share anything we can share. I have a firm belief in transparency as a leadership tool, as the way we run our lives. I think transparency is always positive. So every piece of data collected is somewhere in this document, if not in the recaps and in the highlights in the appendix. So those are actual word for word collections of what was done. I'm going to suggest for any of you that have done this with a large group and you've spent the next 2 weeks taking flip charts or pictures of your flip charts and transcribing them, or if you're lucky enough to have an administrative assistant that does it and you're just going to have to pay them a lot of extra, it is tedious. This was brilliant, folks. As a facilitator of inquiry, this was the best part, because all I had to do was go take it right out of the document and cut and paste it. In some cases, you could just use the document. I'm telling you, this changed my world as far as writing final reports for this. It was just awesome. So, but it's all there. It's all in the report. It was distributed to everybody, all the college faculty, and then all the administration of the college. So and of course, the faculty caucus is using this as their grounding work to do the actual strategic plan for excellence in teaching and learning at the college. And they're doing great work. They've been working at it since first part of September, John, and we've gotten some feedback that they're doing some great work. They're doing really well with it. John and I both had some ideas around just things that we'd learned, and John, you can talk about any of these you want to talk about. I always have, whenever you're facilitating anything, have somebody in the background for support. John and I did that for each other. But if I'm doing something alone, I always have somebody come in as a producer or somebody in the background. Anything with a group more than 25 or 30, I need somebody to watch chat rooms and stuff for me.
Right, and Scott did most of the presenting during this workshop as far as explaining the process. I did the context part. I explained the context of what we were doing. I spent more time fielding comments from the chat room because I was doing more the college-centric stuff, not the AI process stuff. Scott did that. I think this concept of Zoom grace is really important. I mean, we've been on Zoom now for a long time, but it just doesn't always go the way you want. I was in a workshop the other day, and the gentleman said, "I just want you to know that in those moments when I forget to unmute, I am saying profound and brilliant things. So please tell me to unmute or you're going to miss them." And I thought that was really, that was very funny. And then people would just say, "Oh, you're saying something profound and brilliant." And he would know to unmute his thing. But he used that phrase. He said, "I'm going to need some Zoom grace because I'm not a technical expert and we can't know how technology is going to work." And so I think it's important to acknowledge that the virtual setting has some, it will have some hiccups. And there were, we had faculty who had trouble following the Zoom link. They clicked on it and for some reason it didn't do what we expected it to do. So they would end up back in the main room and we'd have to sort of find out how to integrate them back. So we had some strays, but not many.
We have 1 or 2 out of 250 at a time. It was not many. The one that got me was the one that she was having an awful time logging in. I can't log in. I can't log in. I can't log in. So finally, we just had a conversation. So what are you using? Are you on a laptop? Are you on a computer? Well, I'm on my phone. And okay, well, phones are harder. It's hard to watch 2 documents, but okay, let's work you through this. And she goes, "Oh, hold on a second. I'm in Walmart and I just can't hear you. So just hold on a second." And we're like, "Okay, now we know why you can't log in." And that's just a funny story, and it's going to happen. you know, that stuff happens. It became
so
humorous for us, not anything else. So
yeah, and that's why we did say it was important for people to be able to contact us if they never were able to get into Zoom. We needed to know that.
Yeah.
We talked about setting the Google Docs accessibility.
Yep.
I think the key for me, and that's why I would really came back to the navigation guides, is to keep that participant experience as simple as possible. I mean, we had file folders that were sometimes several folders deep to find the form we needed, but we didn't want anyone else to have to go through that structure. So, Deborah, you were asking about how that interface happens with the documents and the breakout rooms. It didn't happen in Zoom. And actually, this is a good point. The first day, we did put the navigation guide in the Zoom chat. We realized quickly then that somebody who was having trouble getting into Zoom wouldn't have it. The second day, we actually emailed the navigation guide to the faculty that morning prior to the session, and that worked better. So I think having them have the sheet, if they get the handout beforehand and they start clicking through to some of the documents, they can't hurt anything, or they shouldn't be able to hurt anything. So I mean, you don't have to be afraid of giving it to them too early. But because we had that navigation document, and so they all had Google Docs open and Zoom open on their computer. And since they had that navigation document, they could go back to that Google Doc and just click to get the tool they needed for each section. So we didn't have to connect Google and Zoom. They actually had both systems open at the same time.
I don't think there's much here, John, that it confuses. And by the way, I got one note that this is like drinking out of a fire hose. I know.
Sorry.
I know it is. I'm here. John's here. We'll connect with you after this if you want to just chat. We know that to shove all this in 2 hours or less here, because we're going to open you to questions here again in a minute, it's just more here than you can take in 2 hours. We're happy to help. We're an Appreciative Inquiry, folks. We're going to help any way we can. So, but this is kind of how the structure. We really only had 3 folders. That's all. We had our masters. These were like masters that John and I worked on and would have if we needed them. But then there were folders, right? So there's all the SOAR group worksheets are in one folder. There's all the master documents, the one for each of those. And I know I'm not getting any particular order here, but there's one of those for each of the communities of interest. Here was our Google Forms for the commitments, right? There's the navigation guide. So we were able to shove these together in a way that kept us organized, right? This is the provocative proposition master document, for instance, is right here. So you can see that it wasn't that hard. There it is. So there's all the stuff they typed for us, right? And you can see some of them got very creative. It's all, it helped. I don't know. For me, it didn't hurt anything from the way we always do our appreciative inquiries in terms of being creative. And but we can help with that structure in the future if you need it.
Yeah, I would say think when you're creating those Google Docs. When I did that in my mind, I had to just I had to think through what the physical AI would have been like. Like how many flip charts would I have? How many times would I have said, take out a piece of paper and write this down? Say, okay, and I know I'm going to have this many groups. So they're not going to be able to tear a sheet off a flip chart. So I'm going to have to create a master document for each of them. And then again, we just had to make the decision up front. Is this a keeper? In which case we want them all to go to our document and work in it, or is it disposable? In which case we'll just make one, put the link in, and they can make a copy for themselves and do whatever they need to do on it, and then just transfer information back into our master sheet. So we had to make some of those logistical decisions in advance. And then Scott's right. The file structure in Google Docs was strictly for us. They never saw, we tried we tried not to have them have to navigate to a subfolder. There was only one time that they did. And since then I thought of a way that we wouldn't have had to do that. But you really want to try and keep it simple. Just if they can click the navigation guide and it takes them, either the tool opens or it takes them right into a folder where they can find their tool by group number, it should be very easy. I guess the other topic that I want to make sure we note on here is and this is something Scott and I talk, we facilitate together all the time. And Scott knows that I get a little frustrated when the documents don't stay pretty, when people put something in line 2 that's supposed to be in line 3. And I get very hung up on my agendas have specific times that we're going to get to everything, knowing that we never will. So I'm just going to say that, yes, just like in all AIs, we immediately fell behind schedule. We had to do some adjustment as we go. And if you're going to do this, you need to plan some extra time to make those transitions between activities. Even though all people have to do, it's not like they have to walk down the hall to a separate room. All they have to do is click, and that will put them in that next room. And so you would think everything would just click along, but they don't all click at the same time. Some of them click and then go to the bathroom. Some of them go to the bathroom and then come back and click. You realize that people are still going to be people.
John thought we were behind time. We weren't behind time. We weren't on the times he wrote on a document somewhere. Okay. We were fine. We never rushed. I never felt like we were like, oh my gosh, we got to cut this out, or we're going to have to shorten this exercise. Not once, not once. And we all do that. As facilitators, we know sometimes we let dialogues go and we need to cut something else. That's great. We're flexible. I don't believe we had to do that. I believe we worked through this.
No, we were good.
And there were times we went, okay, let's bring him back in 40 minutes instead of 45. Okay. But it was never stressful in that sense. And that is one of the differences John and I do. And that's the advantage John has in the partnership, is that he keeps things well organized that way, right? I will also suggest that John and I have complementary strengths. And if you use Clifton's strengths language at all, he's got an arranger strength that's just off the charts. And I've got a very strategic ideation focus, and I can think different ways, and what if, and what if, and what if. And John seems to communicate with that well. And between the two of us, we get stuff done in a way that is well organized generally, right? But not so structured that you can't breathe.
So I would say adopt Scott's mindset that there's plenty of time and everything's going well, and try to avoid my mindset where you expect everything to run like a well-oiled machine.
I would partner. So it's planned to be a well-oiled machine, and then just don't lose your stuff over it when it doesn't happen, right? But you're all facilitators, you know that.
Yeah, so I think we can.
Well, the last comment up here about pre-recorded, I only say that because sometimes in virtual, timing is important. And if we're just talking and talking and talking, and they get so much of us, if you can pre-record those, they all get the same instructions at the same time in the same way, and then you can still be the personal facilitator that you need to be. But I found that to be really helpful in the 2 situations that we used that with. So we are going to take all the questions you want. Here's that link again. It's been in the chat room a couple times. Here it is again. I'd love your feedback on this presentation in particular. There's just a quick little, Google Forms there. The PowerPoint is there. The handout is there, and I will get a recording of this up there and also sent to you at some time in the near future. That would be our intent. So we've got 15 minutes, and I'm in no hurry. I've got a meeting in about 2 hours, so I'm here to chat with you. Anything you want to chat about for the next bit. And
so Scott, we got one right. Gopi asked, on pre-recording those instructions, did you share your screen or did people watch it on their own devices? Just logistically, what we did is we basically had the room host showed the video on their screen because we needed the same instructions to be given in 6 different rooms. And rather than call them back to the main room and give the instructions, we just had the host show the video. And that seemed to work out just fine.
Sorry.
Great, thank you.
Okay. You can unmute, or you can put your questions in the chat. We'll take them either way.
Yeah, we probably don't need the slides up anymore either, do we?
No, let's look at your grandkids.
So we can look at it. Oh, there you go. You want to see those again? 2 of them, yeah. Being a grandparent rocks, for any of you that haven't had a chance to do that yet. So,
any other questions or comments or reflections? How is anything you can think of how this might impact your practice?
A question that I have is, this is a real technical approach, and putting forms together and getting people to fill out forms, and so you've got a combination of conversation and forms. Right. I wonder. Do people get bored with that?
I didn't find it to be true because the topics change so often, Deborah. I hear you. I totally grasp. And I did it again. I think I said for Wren Lake not too long after this, and it was only one session, not two half days. It was the same thing because it's just different enough, and they're with different people enough. That's part of the reason we didn't keep them in the same talking group entire 2 days, is that it created new conversations and new energy. And the documents were so easy. I know it doesn't sound like it from this perspective because we have to set them up. But if you're a participant in this, all you did was click something on that navigation sheet and a document opened, and you and all your friends were writing on it, and you were talking, or you could say, I don't know how to do this. And somebody else said, well, I'll write. It was a collective. So I didn't hear that feedback that they got bored. I heard feedback that they thought the whole thing was a waste because they hate their job. I got that I had to be paired on an interview with somebody that was so negative I didn't want to talk to them. But that happens, that stuff. I didn't hear that I'm bored or this is repetitious, because it doesn't feel that way while you're doing it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Deborah asked if we can share actual documents rather than PDFs so that she doesn't have to retype everything. Yeah, we had that debate.
They're not documents, Deborah. They're Google Docs, so they are links.
Yeah. But I think I could probably
do the
out.
master. If we selected all the masters and put them into a Google shared folder, we could probably send a link to that folder.
Yeah. You did such a great job of,
I hear you.
Handling the octopus and like breaking it down into like really like simple, doable like steps, and your clarity and your experience of taking what you know and putting it into something. Yeah, so I'm just like really excited, and of course I'm like I have to start facilitating one next Tuesday, and I was like waiting for this. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to sign up for your thing because I have some ideas and that sort of thing, but just really practical and helpful. So I just really want to thank you guys for taking your time to share your process of how we did this. So,
Deborah, why don't you reach out by email just right now or right as soon as we're done, and then you and I can talk either this afternoon or tomorrow to help you with Tuesday. That's why I do this. I'll help any way I can. So I'll be glad to give you some advice or share some documents if that will help you, or we'll figure that out. Just give me an email.
I really appreciate that.
Yep.
I'm going to take you up on that. And everybody heard him, right? Everyone heard him.
Yeah, and you all can too.
I need a gift, and I'm taking it.
One of the things that I've always believed, and it got even more during COVID, was we just need to produce ourselves in life, and it's not done with expectation of return. I heard that said once. That's what a sunrise or a sunset is. It publishes itself in the world every day and doesn't expect return. I have a consulting business. Okay, I'm fine. I'm retired. I can work as much as I want to help you all with what you do. That's exciting. And then maybe there's someday we partner on something or something. That's not what it's about. So let me know.
Yeah, so I will look at whether I can create some replicable versions of those documents, and if so, I'll put them in a folder, and Scott will put that on his website. Okay. Other comments or questions?
Yeah. How can we help? Don't all talk at once. David.
I don't know what I was expecting, to be honest, but the whole technical background work, I thought, okay, we did Zoom rooms and this and that. That's kind of what I was expecting. But to have the technical background stuff and kind of how you organized it is very, very helpful. So thank you.
Good. Very welcome. And like I say, when you look at what I tried to do in the handout is organize everything by each day, so you can see visually what all the handouts looked like as we went through.
And I think the navigation piece is with hyperlinks is genius, because I would never have thought to do that. I would have organized it but never linked it that well. So
yeah, I got a lot of good feedback on that. That worked out really well.
Yep.
You could also, if you were really, if that wasn't your thing, like you say, you could create it in a Blackboard shell or a Canvas shell. You could create a little mini website. You could create a little mini website with the links on it. It's really just getting everything in one place. We just really tried to, again, one of our pieces was we really tried to use technology that our faculty were familiar with, just so it wouldn't become another barrier. And Google, everyone was fine with Google. I think Zoom was still new to enough people that it presented a few challenges, but it was all we had. I mean, we were all living in Zoom anyway. So if you hadn't used it yet, you certainly were about to. So we didn't really feel too bad about it subjecting
After
people
doing
to Zoom.
2 of these at Ren Lake and using Canvas as the navigation host, right? That instead of the navigation page that we created, that was on a page inside there. I would do it that way every time if the college or if the organization had a platform like that, because they had to log in there anyway. They already had all their, there was no doubt that they could log into that. We weren't dependent on Zoom. We weren't dependent on Google. And from there, they can communicate or they have access to everything.
I think if you do, if
one
you're
place,
if you use something like, if you used like SharePoint would probably do it, or even like OneDrive, if you're in the Microsoft environment, you could probably do that. You could probably do this with Teams instead of Zoom if you're using Teams. Or
I've talked about using my own website to do that, because I have a website and I can easily add a page with links. It could be done that way.
Yeah,
but having one home place is important. With the launch off links from there is really critical.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for the pragmatic structure and the organizational schematics that you used. I mean, that is the work that you have to put in to facilitate this before the event begins. But then I see the long range applications for this with accessibility.
Yes.
Your videos can have closed caption, text to speech. People are able to participate regardless of barrier.
Yes.
So I don't know if I'd ever go back to a flip chart after seeing this, to be frank. So I'm very thankful for this and your willingness to share. Plus your quote about the sunrise, Scott, I wrote that down. That's the most beautiful thing I've heard in a long time. So as an educator, thank you. So thankful for this.
I think the only thing you lose, and it's a trade-off, I think the only thing you lose, and Scott and I talked about this, is the buzz. I mean, when you have a room, everyone in the room full of people, all that noise and energy and laughter and all of those things, obviously you lose this. You can do that in a breakout room. You can laugh and joke and have energy, but you don't get the scale of it when you're doing it virtually. But you still get the spirit of it, and you still do get the positivity and the outcomes. I think that's the trade-off. And I think the other thing about the virtual environment is it's very easy. You do need to keep people engaged. You need to focus a little more on engagement, because it's so easy to flip over to your email window or have something else in the room. I mean, it's much easier to be disengaged or distracted. And that's why I think the fact that in AI, you're not doing, nothing takes more than an hour. The SOAR took an hour. The interview took 25 minutes. There's always a new thing that you're doing as you're walking them through the process. And I think that helped keep people engaged. But
I did a large scale that was geographically disparate, right? We had people all over the country, and we were able to bring about 300 plus to one site and did it in the room. So what we did, and this is a few years ago, is that we took our strategic planning committee and we offered interviews. So they went and did the interview questions with people on the phone, right, over the next 6 months or whatever. We had it set up so they could say, I want to be interviewed, and got interviewed, brought that data in and tried to make it part of it. This would have changed that world, right? It was great. It was well done. The interviews were great. The best we could do. This would have changed the world, because we could have had the entire it would have to be a United States organization, but it would have been all of the schools in the state that were participating. We could have had 1,000 people on this thing and made it work and gotten the feedback. So I think we were representative in our efforts, but man, this would have been cool back then.
Yeah.
Really cool.
250 felt, I don't know if I could do 500. 250 felt like a lot to me, but
it was. But you know what? It once you get going and you've got it all laid out, as long as you got a couple of facilitators to answer questions and all,
it's very scalable.
It's scalable because it doesn't matter whether you got 25 or 250. You're doing the same work.
Yeah.
I did it for the Wren Lake groups I told you were smaller. They were groups of 50 and there were 6 groups during the week. It was every bit as much work as this. And it was 50 instead of 250. It's scalable, but it's about the same amount of work. You still got to set up every document. You still got to set up every link. You still got to answer their questions. So it's all good.
Okay.
Well, we're losing a few people because it is time. I don't want to keep you past your time. Go watch the recordings of the inauguration for those of you interested, right? So I really appreciate you all being here and being so attentive and everything. It's awesome. It's great. It makes my day to be able to communicate with you. So Deborah, I'll look forward to chatting with you. And I think somebody else already wrote me an email. So let me know and we'll connect. We'll do that right away. Okay. Get you set for Tuesday. All right. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, everyone.
Be in touch. Anything we can do to help, just be in touch.
Bye now.